Greetings Astra Militarum players, it is the MLG Foozer here. Today I will be analyzing the Warhammer Legends datasheets from Forgeworld for the Astra Militarum, discussing the mistakes and fixes that have been made to them, and doing comparisons between their 8th edition datasheets and new 9th edition datasheets. In general, these Forgeworld Legends datasheets are unbalanced, inconsistent, riddled with mistakes, and less flavorful than their previous iterations. A quick note before we get started, when I say base loadout, I am referring to the loadout given by the datasheet. This means that whatever the datasheet equips it with by default is its base loadout. This is not always going to be the cheapest loadout. First category we're going to start with is the general HQ choices for the Astra Militarum. First we have the Salamander Command Tank. This has been moved from the Elite to the HQ slot. It started at 132 points in 8th and is now 100 points in 9th edition. The stat line is identical to 8th, except that the weapons have now been buffed in the form of the Heavy Bolter having 2 damage and the Heavy Flamer having 12 inches of range. The Auspex Surveyor ability got a rework. So in 8th edition, this rule allowed you to add 1 to hit rolls for a friendly regiment vehicle within 6 inches. And now instead it has a 24-inch range ability that targets a single unit. After you target that unit, vehicles within 6 inches of the Salamander that target the selected unit of the ability ignore the target's cover. Has the same vehicle options as before with the Hunter-Killer Missile, Heavy Stubber, and Storm Bolter. Overall, this is a pretty fluffy choice now if you're going to run a mechanized list, and I could see getting some use out of the Auspex Surveyor ability against armies that abuse cover benefits. Alright, now we're going to enter the Elite section. The first unit we have is the Atlas Recovery Tank. First thing to note is that this is still on a Chimera chassis stat line, despite the model being made on Lehman Russ chassis. Its stat line is identical along with its bracketing to its 8th edition datasheet. It is 98 point space in 8th and now only 80 point space in 9th. The recovery vehicle ability has been changed so that it only affects a vehicle once per turn. It has the same upgrade options as before with the Hunter-Killer Missile, Heavy Stubber, and Storm Bolter. The next unit we have is the Sentinel Powerlifter. First, this has been moved to the Elite slot from Heavy Support. The base stat line is the exact same, except that the attack stat is now at 1 instead of 3. The Powerlifter weapon is exactly the same, except that it now allows for 2 additional attacks to be made each time it's used. This is essentially the same amount of attacks as the old one. It was 45 points in 8th and now costs 50 points in 9th. We're now going to move on to the fast attack selections. The first one we have is the Salamander Scout Tank. Its stat line is the exact same, except that the Heavy Bolter's been updated to 2 damage, so that slightly increases its overall damage capacity. It now costs 75 points in 9th instead of the 73 points it was in 8th. It still also has the same vehicle upgrades in the form of the Hunter-Killer Missiles, Heavy Stubbers, and Storm Bolters. The next unit we have after that is the Artemia Pattern Hellhound. This is still fast attack, however it no longer has its own unique datasheet. It's now a turret upgrade for the standard Hellhound at plus 20 points. What this means is that it loses its fuel explosion of D6 mortal wounds, dropping to D3 since it's on the standard Hellhound chassis. It was 101 points base in 8th, it now costs 130 points base in 9th. The stat line has changed overall. Its new stat line is range 16 inches, heavy 2d3, strength 6, AP -1, damage 2. The old stat line is range 16 inches, heavy d6, strength 6, AP -1, damage 2, with the ability to roll 2d6 and keep the highest for number of shots. So overall you're looking at a slight decrease in overall number of shots, but that's going to be a more consistent number of shots overall. After that, we come to the Tauros vehicle family. The first one we have is the Tauros Assault Vehicle. The stat line is exactly identical to its 8th edition counterpart. There has been a change to its galvanic motor ability that is overall a nerf. Instead of moving over 10 inches to gain a 5++, you now have to advance to get the 5+ invuln, which significantly nerfs its overall durability. The explosion radius has been reduced from 6 inches to 3 inches and still deals 1 mortal wound. 51 points base in 8th, and it now costs 50 points in 9th. The Heavy Flamer profile is updated, and the grenade launcher is now a free weapon swap. And models in this unit still have to keep coherency as they do not have the vehicle squadron rule. The next vehicle is the Tauros Venator. Its stat line also remains unchanged. Again, it has seen the change to galvanic motor, meaning that if you want to get the 5+ invuln, you'll have to advance now. Its explosion radius was also reduced from 6 inches to 3 inches, and again still deals a single mortal wound. The Venator targeting array is gone, but that would have been redundant as that ability basically let it ignore the heavy weapons penalty when it moved. It was 64 points base in 8th, and it now is 50 points base in 9th. There was a time period where the twin multi-laser was listed as heavy 3, but that has been changed to heavy 6 as of the latest update. It still cannot take 2 Hunter Killer missiles despite the model having 2. Next category we're moving on to is heavy support choices. Let's go ahead and start off with the General Leman Russ tank. It has gained a few options here. The first thing is that the Leman Russ Conqueror has been completely gutted. It now counts as a battle cannon with a Storm Bolter that costs 5 points extra since you have to pay for the Storm Bolter. You can now also get a battle cannon with a heavy stubber at plus 5 points. The Leman Russ Annihilator is now a twin las cannon turret option for the Leman Russ at plus 25 points. The Ryza Pattern Vanquisher is not mentioned at all, neither as an option for a Vanquisher with heavy stubber or a unique stat line. Since it isn't in, the Griffin 4 pattern isn't either. The Styges Pattern Vanquisher has a new stat line and costs 10 points to use. The new stat line is range 72 inches, heavy 1, strength 8, AP -3, damage 3 plus D3. The old stat line was range 72 inches, heavy 1, strength 8, AP -3, damage D6 with the following abilities. If this model did not move this turn in the shooting phase, add 1 to hit rolls and roll 2 dice when inflicting damage with this weapon and discard the lowest result. So overall, you're getting a more reliable damage output now, but you did lose that add 1 to hit rolls ability, which will significantly hurt its overall damage output. And moving on from Leman Russes entirely, we now get to the batteries. The Earthshaker battery has remained mostly the same. Its stat line is identical. Its explosion is now triggers on the 6+, and it's 3 inches with 1 mortal wound instead of a 6+, 6 inches D3 mortal wound explosion. It lost the immobile rule, meaning it isn't auto hit in melee, which is nice, but friendly units can't shoot at the units within 1 inch of it anymore. It was 115 points in 8th, and now 125 points in 9th. The next battery is the Hydra battery. Again, its stat line is identical, and its explosion has also been changed to be much lighter. It was 75 points in 8th, and is now 80 points in 9th. This again also lost the immobile rule, meaning it is an auto hit in melee, but friendly units cannot shoot units that are within 1 inch of it. The last of the batteries is the Manticore battery. This one's stat line is still identical, and its special rules have changed in the same way as the other 2 batteries. It was 150 points in 8th, and now costs 120 points in 9th. It now has the Storm Eagle rockets, instead of what it had before, which was Manticore missiles or Sky Eagle rockets. This is overall a plus because the Storm Eagle rockets are a much better choice than either the Manticore missiles or the Sky Eagle rockets. Next, under heavy support choices, we have the Griffin Mortar Carrier. It has an identical stat line. Its heavy mortar has lost the roll 2d6 keep highest for shots at d3 damage, but it now gains blast, and the damage has been changed to flat 2. It was 85 points base in 8th, and still 85 points base in 9th as well. Next up, we have the Saber Weapons Battery. It started as 34 points base in 8th, and now costs 50 points base in 9th. Despite the heavy stubber saber option having 2 twin stubbers, it can now only take a single twin heavy stubber. Its overall stat line is the same, with the addition of a wound, so it is now at 4 wounds instead of 3. It no longer explodes, meaning that your stuff in the back where this would be sitting is much safer. Its Skyfire ability has been reworked to add 2 to hit rolls against aircraft. The old Skyfire added 1 to hit rolls when targeting fly and subtracted 1 against non-fly. This is overall a win when you're shooting aircraft and when you're shooting ground targets, and the only area where this loses out is against things like battle suits that have the fly keyword. The other weapon options remain unchanged except for the heavy bolters, which obviously have been buffed in damage. Next we have the Styges Destroyer Tank Hunter that was 160 points base in 8th and is now 155 points in 9th. It lost 3 wounds in this transition, so it's now at 10 wounds instead of 13. Its weapon profile has changed from 60-inch range, heavy D3, strength 9, AP-3, damage D6, to 72-inch range, heavy 2, strength 12, AP-4, damage 3 plus D3. It did lose the Tank Hunter ability, which allowed its neutron projector to roll 2d6 and keep highest for damage against vehicle targets. However, this new weapon actually puts out higher damage than that ability allowed for the old weapon. The brackets are the same, except that the top bracket is now 6 to 10 wounds instead of 6 to 13. Not really sure why this has less wounds than a Leman Russ. I would have thought that they would have just brought it down to 12 wounds like the standard Leman Russ family, but Legends rules writing. If we do a math comparison between both versions of the neutron laser projector, we find that against any vehicle target, the new one is overall more reliable. Next category we have is dedicated transports. The Griffin Pattern Chimera is first. There was a period where there was no autocannon option, but that has been fixed. The first one is a twin heavy bolter turret. That is an upgrade that costs 25 points. And again, as of that latest update, the autocannon is now an option at plus 10 points cost. Up next under dedicated transports, we have the Centaur Light Carrier. This was 50 points in 8th edition and is now 50 points in 9th edition. The stat line is identical. It is still equipped with 2 heavy stubbers, despite this variant of the model having only 1. The explosion has been toned down to a 6 plus 3 inches 1 mortal wound, instead of the 6 plus 6 inches D3 mortal wounds it used to have. The artillery tractor ability has been reworked to be a little bit less convoluted, and overall it's a gain. Previously in the movement phase, if the Centaur started its move within 1 inch of an artillery model, you could tow it, which meant that the Centaur would move 12 inches and the artillery piece would be placed within 1 inch of the model along with its crew. The big downside with this was that you could not fire the artillery model the turn it was towed. Now, for 9th edition, each time the Centaur is selected to make a normal move in the movement phase, it can tow 1 artillery model within 1 inch of it. If it does so after the Centaur makes its move, the artillery model is set up within 1 inch of the Centaur and within 12 inches of its original starting position. There is, however, no restriction on the shooting of the towed artillery model, meaning you can now shoot with that model after you've towed it, which is definitely a huge plus for the low-range ones, such as the Medusa. And it still has 5 transport capacity with the normal Astra Militarum restrictions. Next up, we have the flyer choices. There's only one option here, which is the Aquila Lander. This was 118 points in 8th, and is now 105 points base in 9th. Stat line has shifted a bit. Its weapon skill, ballistic skill, strength, toughness, leadership, and save are all the exact same. However, movement remains the same in the top 2 brackets, but in the last bracket it moves 20 to 25 inches instead of its previous flat 20 inches. Attacks now degrade and start at 3, going down to D3 and then to 1. Previously it had a consistent 2 attacks. The brackets used to be from 12 to 5 wounds, 4 to 3, and 2 to 1 wounds. Now they are 12 to 7, 6 to 4, and 3 to 1. Overall, it's a bit worse at bracketing. Still has the same weapon options, with the autocannon and heavy bolter costing an extra 10 points, while the multi-laser is free. Most abilities are unchanged, however it loses aerial assault, meaning it can no longer deep strike. Still has that odd 7 transport capacity. Weirdly enough, it has the regiment keyword, meaning you can get benefits from regimental doctrines now. Up next we have the General Astra Militarum Lord of War choices. The first of these is the Arcurian Pattern Stormhammer. The model is still in production, but unfortunately it has been relegated to Legends. The main stat line and brackets are identical to their 8th edition counterpart. It has lost the coaxial weapon ability, which makes the Stormhammer cannon worse overall. The coaxial weapon allowed for the cannon to reroll failed hit rolls if the coaxial multi-laser fired at the same target. The Stormhammer cannon has been buffed for damage consistency, now sitting at 60-inch range, heavy 2d3, strength 9, AP -3, and damage 2d3, instead of the previous iteration, which was 60-inch range, heavy d6, strength 9, AP -3, and damage d6, with the abilities to reroll damage rolls of 1 and roll 2 dice, discarding the lowest for number of shots. It now treats the coaxial multi-laser like the sponsons, meaning you can put a las cannon or a heavy bolter in its place. This was 435 base cost in 8th, and is now 440 base points in 9th. The math between both cannons is shown below. As you can see, the old cannon stat line overall inflicted more damage against either marine equivalent targets or vehicles. Before moving on to the next 3 Lord of War choices, I just want to clarify that they have not been brought in line with their melee profiles with the modern Imperial Guard Lord of War choices. What this means is that they have a 5+ weapon skill, a lower number of attacks, and they also have a higher strength as well. The unfortunate downside is that they do not get adamantium tracks or the attack increase that you see with the current rules. Anyways, up next is the Dominus Armored Siege Bombard. The stat line is identical except for the brackets, which shifted 1 wound up, so instead of being 20 to 10 wounds, 9 to 5, and 4 to 1, it is now 20 to 11 wounds, 10 to 5, and 4 to 1. The main triple bombard has the same weapon stats, except it now gains blast for added efficiency against multi-model units. It was 616 points base in 8th, and now costs 500 points base in 9th. Next up, we have one of my favorites, the Gorgon Armored Assault Transport. This model actually just entered production again a year ago, but they have decided to relegate it to Legends. The stat line is the exact same. It lost 8 wounds, though, now sitting at 22 wounds instead of 30. The brackets have changed only to when it degrades, not what exactly or how much degrades. The old Gorgon was in the top bracket from 30 to 14 wounds, and then the second bracket at 13 to 7 wounds, and the lowest bracket at 6 to 1. The new Gorgon has its top bracket from 22 to 12 wounds, its second from 11 to 6 wounds, and its third from 5 to 1. Initially, when they released this Legends datasheet, the Gorgon had no transport capacity. However, that was quickly fixed, but its transport capacity now sits at 30 models instead of 50 models. The Crassus holds more than it now at 35 models. The Gorgon mortars have gained blast for that same efficiency against multi-model units. The abilities remain the same, meaning it still has the 5+ invulnerable save. It is 320 points base in 9th with the Stubber loadout, and 314 points base in 8th with the Gorgon mortar loadout. It costs 10 additional points for every Gorgon mortar, heavy flamer, or heavy bolter. And really, at this point, you should just be taking a Crassus, because this has less transport capacity and costs more. The last Lord of War option we have is the Macarius Omega. This has sadly not been brought in line with the other Macarius variants, just like I mentioned earlier, meaning it doesn't have adamantium tracks, and it has a lower number of attacks, which is 3, while still keeping strength 8 and weapon skill 5+. The stat line is identical, except for the brackets, which have shifted from the old Omega having its top bracket from 22 wounds to 11 wounds, second bracket from 10 to 6, and last bracket from 5 to 1. The new Omega now has its top bracket from 22 to 12 wounds, and second bracket from 11 to 6 wounds, with the last bracket staying the same. The Plasma Blast Gun gains blast, but is otherwise unchanged. It was 355 points base in 8th, and is now 340 points base in 9th. Next, we're going to move on to Tallarn-specific units. The only thing here is the Mukali Rough Riders. These have now gained a points cost, where previously in 8th edition they had a special open narrative play datasheet only. They now come in at 22 points per model. They also gained a point of toughness. They're now toughness 5 instead of 4. The stat lines other than that are the same. They still have the same special weapon options / sergeant upgrades, and they are still fast attack. After that, we come to the Elysian-specific units. First, we have the Elysian Drop Sentinel. It was 48 points base in 8th and is now 50 points base in 9th. Basically, every weapon option that this drop sentinel had has become better, so that's a pretty big win. The special rules are all the same, meaning it can still aerial drop, and it has the Elysian drop troop keyword, so it is restricted to Elysian. We also have the Elysian Sniper Squad. Has the exact same stat line, except it lost a point of leadership. It also lost the aerial drop ability and gains the weapons team ability, meaning it now counts as 2 models for transport purposes. 21 points for a unit of 3 in 8th, and now 30 points for a unit of 3 in 9th. Again, this is restricted to Elysian only. We lastly have the Valkyrie Sky Talon. This is a flyer choice. This is a model that is still in production, but they decided not to port it over for the General Astra Militarum. It was 162 points base in 8th and is now 125 points base in 9th. The brackets have again shifted slightly. The old bracketing was 14 to 8 wounds, 7 to 4, and 3 to 1. The new bracketing is 14 to 7, 6 to 4, and 3 to 1. The stat line is unchanged except for its lowest bracket movement stat, which is now 20 to 25 inches instead of just flat 20 inches. The ability weapons that wound Karis and roll for damage count as 1 damage. A quick note that when they originally released the Legends rules, his Implacable Officer ability stated that at the start of the morale phase you'd select a Krieg unit within 6 inches, and they would ignore the penalty for having a half strength. Flamer teams, but this has been fixed. The stat line has not changed at all, meaning they still have weapon skill 3, and they now have the option for sniper rifles due to having access to the full special weapons list. Next up for Krieg in the elite slot, we have the Quartermaster Cadre. There was initially a problem where he was listed as troops, but he's now been fixed to be in the elite slot. In 8th edition, it was 33 points for the Revenant and 2 per Servitor, with the option for a metapack at plus 5 points. It is now 5 points per model in 9th, regardless of type, and there is no metapack option. The stat lines are the exact same for both the Servitors and the Revenant. The medical scalpels now wound on 2+, unless the target is Titanic or vehicle. Previously, this was limited to just vehicle. The Revenant has lost some weapon options in the form of the Hotshot Lasgun, Las Pistol, 2 Bolt Pistols, 2 Las Pistols, and 2 Hotshot Las Pistol weapons. He now has an option for the Plasma Pistol, Bolt Gun, and Hotshot Las Pistol. He did initially have the option for a Plasma Gun, but this has since been fixed. The melee weapon options are Power Sword, Power Fist, Power Maul, or Power Axe, with no Chainsword option. The way that the weapon point cost works is that basically the Revenant's the only one who can actually take the Bolt Pistol, Bolt Gun, Hotshot Las Pistol, or Plasma Pistol, and so those all cost a ludicrous amount of points. It is 22 points for the Bolt Gun, 20 points for the Hotshot Las Pistol, plus 25 points for the Plasma Pistol, and plus 22 points for the Bolt Pistol. The Power Sword is plus 5 points, and the Power Fist is plus 10 points. This is so that you balance out the cost of the Revenant compared to the Servitors, since they all start at a base cost of 5 points. Previously, the Revenant had the abilities Mind Lock, which was Servitors within 6 inches of a Revenant gain 4+ weapon skill and 4+ ballistic skill, along with Leadership 9. He had the Metapack ability, if you paid 5 points, which on a 4+, healed a single 1 wound infantry model who died, or a model with multiple wounds regained 1, and Vitae Mortis, which was a 6+ feel no pain for infantry or cavalry within 6 inches, and this did not stack with the augmented mount ability. He now has Mind Lock, which is whilst the unit has a Revenant, servitors have a 4+ weapon skill, and he has a Metapack Aura, which is a 3-inch aura of 6+ feel no pain for Krieg infantry. The Death Rider Commissar is also an Elite's choice. It was 35 points base in 8th, and now costs 25 points base in 9th. The stat line is identical. The Death Rider Commissar has gained the dual-wield pistol options of las pistols, hotshot las pistols, and bolt pistols. Also gained the hotshot las gun, hotshot las pistol, and the bolt gun. He previously only had the bolt pistol, las pistol, or plasma pistol. The melee options are unchanged. Unfortunately, he does not have the Krieg Steed attacks despite the latest update, so unlike regular Death Riders, you will not have the extra attacks from the mount. The abilities are the same except for Augmented Mount, which has been updated to be a 5+ feel no pain, and War Strider, which has been removed entirely. Krieg have a specific transport option in the form of the Storm Chimera. That was 98 points base in 8th and is now 95 points in 9th. The stat line is unchanged, though the brackets on the new datasheet are messed up. They state that the top bracket is at 10 to 6 wounds and that the second bracket is at 6 to 3 wounds. My guess is that it was likely meant to say the second bracket is 5 to 3 wounds. It did lose its lasgun arrays, and the Ablative Storm Armor / Mind Plow upgrade are gone. The Storm Armor was a +1 to saves against weapons of strength 4 or less, and the Mind Plow let it ignore landmines on a 4+. I think that might have had to do with a narrative scenario or something, I have no idea. It gains the option for Track Guards and the Dozer Blade, and still has the same transport capacity of 12. The unfortunate thing here is that for Krieg there is no Centaur Light Assault Carrier. Even though originally in the Legends PDF it did have a slot in the points section, there has not been an update where it's been given a datasheet, so you've lost on that synergy with Grenadiers using Centaurs. In conclusion, the Legends rules writing is inconsistent at best, and we've seen a good handful of changes to these units. Some good, most bad. But thanks for watching, and if you want to see more 40k content, feel free to stick around.